Guys, Dave Smith, episode 4 of Ask Dave Anything. You send your questions in, I give you answers. Let's get right down to business. Don B. emailed asking, does Factor 5 sell fully completed projects with no customer involvement other than selecting various project components, color, engine size, suspension? It's a good question. It's about whether we build finished cars, and we don't. We never have. The phalanx of builders we have out there that we've kind of gotten to know over 29 years are some great high-quality builders. They're separate companies than ours. We really focus on parts and engineering. That's kind of our specialty. So when it comes to chassis, suspension, design, and how all that integrates together, that's what Factor 5 does well. There is a chance we do make finished vehicles. It will be under the Low Volume Act. To this point, there hasn't been a federalized engine. So no kit car company has really been able to build finished cars and sell them with VIN numbers because there hasn't been a certified federalized air pump, essentially an engine that's certified under CARB standards. That's part of the law. Next question, Matt H. on Facebook. He asked, will you open another location? We've kind of talked about that over the years. We had Factor 5 West, we talked about, we definitely have, essentially distributors and builders around the country. We have Dan Walsh out in the UK. We had a great builder down in Australia that didn't work out in the long run. I'm kind of old fashioned. It's kind of like, work from home versus Factor 5. I like everybody in one place. It's great. It's easier to lead a group of people that are all together and kind of are doing work together. Communication is better. So I don't think we're going to open another location. And I don't think our business is really scalable. It's not, a company you'd go public with and you think you're going to open 10 different locations. I hope that answers your question. CNEV3824 on YouTube asked, what chassis number did Roadster production start with? I've heard it started out with number 1. I've heard it start out with 1,000 and starting with 1,200. What did it start with? It was 1995. I actually looked before. I looked at this question. Sean Kelly in December of 95 got the first kit, and his kit number was 1011K. And so we started out at the 1000 series. And, maybe you're a small company. It was a long, long time ago, and you don't want to start with number 1. But before Sean Kelly, I think Peter was 2. Ed, there were a bunch of probably the first 10, 15, 20 guys. I remember Dave Borden was like number 20 to 30. You remember a lot of those early guys. But, we didn't want to start the numbering sequence 001, and that really wouldn't be accurate either because we did a prototype before Factor 5 was incorporated. Bob Lasciuto, he got kit number 1, and then Sonny Sylvia bought demo kit number 2. And those were really, X chassis. I remember Nick Frezza in Oregon bought kit number 3. Now, those weren't really kits. They were prototype vehicles. 2 guys in a garage developing cars and looking for cash flow. But I think kit production started with Sean Kelly at 1011, 1011K. Chuck S. on Facebook asked, why don't you make a kit for pretty much anything Chevy with all their rotting frame issues? Corrosion's been an issue on the GM stuff. Colorado would be a great candidate. This way the truck, a lower priced donor truck for the XTF. That's also a good question, but it's more of a question of cash flow and whether this new product, the XTF, and this new product category of build your own pre-runner truck, which nobody's ever invented before, how fast it catches. I think that if the XTF, the sales kind of outstrip our production abilities and go further where I think they are, we'll use the revenues from that to definitely turn our sights on the GM platform stuff. And then that's when your truck would come around. Right now, we're focusing solely on the Ford. And, I'm not like I'm leaking any news, but we've been doing a lot of development work on a stage 1 XTF, looking at the early XTF sales. It's $25,000 plus wheels, tires, maybe carbon panels. You're in it for 30, 35 grand plus your F-150 that could be a $50,000 donor. So, a stage 1 kit would be everything except for the chassis. So we would still do heavy-duty suspension, longer travel suspension, kind of more like what a Raptor does. They use the stock frame, but they upgrade suspension components, big Raptor leaf springs in the back. We could use carbon panels or the XTF panels, which are super wide and aggro. I know that Owen, Colby, Jesper, and Jim have been driving the stage 1 kit. We're going to announce that soon. Probably $9,900, $10,000 if you've got an F-150 to build a stage 1 XTF. They'll look the same, but they won't have that long travel Baja capable suspension chassis. Corey K on Facebook asked, what kind of motorcycles do you have? I wish I had all the motorcycles that I hadn't sold. But right now I've got 3 Ducatis. I've got an old Ducati in 1995, one of the very last before they went to the 916, but it essentially had the developmental 916 engine, the 888 SPO. I have a 95, number 95 out of 100. That's a wonderful motorcycle to ride. I've got a 2007, really what I consider to be the best and the last of the monsters. It had the Testa Stretta engine, so it was the race motor in an upright, hooligan bike. That's a Monster S4 RS. That's a '07. And then I've got a newer one. When I knew that the V4 was coming out, it was just a matter of time. Ducati was making, a V-twin, 1300cc V-twin, turn 12,000 RPM. In order to get the horsepower, I was already at 205 horsepower. I bought a 2017 Panigale Anniversario. So those three Ducatis, there's some others I've been looking at, especially some of the Cagiva bikes and the earlier bikes, the Panta and the Dharma stuff. But right now, those are the three Ducatis I have. I've got an old GSX R1100 that I had in college, probably one of the nicest ones in the country. I've got a really oddball Suzuki Turbo 83. They made about, I don't know, maybe 600 that were imported in the US. I've got one that has about 6,000 miles on it. It's called an XN85 Turbo. 85 stood for the amount of horsepower. I have two Katanas. I loved the Hans Muth design. Suzuki was like the king of the universal Japanese motorcycles back in the late 70s with the GS1000s. And they hired a Target Design, Hans and two other guys, to design essentially a really radical looking, but fairly conventional, not a lot of cutting edge technology on it. But it was a really cool bike, and it's a bike I couldn't have in college. So I've got a few of those kind of quirky 80s bikes. I've got a VF1000 R, and I am negotiating with Darren Beggs Customs out of Canada on a really nice CB1100 RD. It's actually an 82 RC model converted to an RD model, but that was kind of the end of the inline 4 development race stuff. So motorcycles, I'll talk all day. Several customers asked, where did the name Factory 5 Racing and logo come from? That's kind of fun because, when you're starting out a company, one of the questions you have to answer is, what are you going to name your company? And a lot of rookies will, name their company. I've said to customers, let's say you have a computer company, you're going to call it, Advanced Computer Technologies, ACT, Avoid acronyms because you're too small. If you're IBM, you can pull off an acronym, but Steve Jobs named his company Apple, right? Unrelated to computers is Apple, so it's a distinctive name. So you want to try to be unique and distinctive and not too closely branded to, like for us, American Speedworks or something. Yeah, that's too generic. So Factory 5 Racing, we came up with a variety of terms, and each one had to be some significance to it, but the entire name had to have kind of enough of a nebulous meaning that could be really defended from a trademark standpoint. You wouldn't be confused with someone else. So factory, we figured that our company would be based firmly on factory engineering. So, complex drive systems, cooling systems, fuel delivery systems, engines, transmissions. We're going to try to avoid that. We certainly don't have the complexity and the capital and the experience to engineer those drivetrains and those systems. So we wanted to make our designs based on factory engineering. Factory. That first motor was the donor Mustang 5.0. So 5 was a natural number. There was no fourth factory, a third factory, second and first factory. It was just factory. And then 5 was from the 5.0. And, Enzo Ferrari was the inspiration for racing. The kit car industry had a fairly, checkered past. It was kind of the 4-letter word when it comes to automotive. And we wanted to change that. And you change your designs by racing. Racing is the ultimate litmus test. And, it's the cauldron against which you put your designs. And we found it real quick and went to the track. We autocrossed our first designs. And so we figured we had to put racing in everything we did. So Factory 5 Racing was an unrelated to replicas and all that, and something that down the road we could defend from a trademark standpoint. So that's the story behind the logo and the name. Anyway, Dave, those are the questions I had. These are questions that people ask when they come into the showroom, and it's kind of fun because we have these one-on-one discussions with people, but it's more fun to do it this way. We can communicate with a few more people. But Factory 5 Racing, Dave, it's a gorgeous day out, so we're going to get outside today, maybe get some cars out. New England is famous for proving the philosophical truth that, pleasure The most intense pleasure is the absence of pain. And if you live in New England and you suffer through January and February, days like today where it's 65, 70 degrees, bright blue skies, just made for driving. Fall in New England is here. Episode 4 is in the bag. If you got any questions, email, call, text, whatever you want. Post it on social media. I'll try to give you a straight answer. Dave out. Thanks, Dave.